Okay, welcome again. We're going to make a little digital asset. It's fairly simple. It's a cluster in my transformations, and I've called it rope, which is pretty simple. So if you take a look at that cluster, we can grab the first one. It's pretty, yeah, I've put basically the same cluster to this target curve, which is catenary curve. Sorry, to this curve, but it has a certain length. It has to flow along that. So you can add the length, which takes a little time to adjust. You can mark up, say you want to go to 20 feet. That's going to extend that all the way along and then continue along that rope path. I have another one that's along a spiral, which has been generated from this code, an interpolated curve, which is a spiral. You'll see it in here. If I put this on, you see the spiral curve, which then goes and ropes that. And then I have a catenary arc curve, which then can be roped and set to a length. And then I think I just have a wild curve here that I just put in at the end to stretch that rope. So basically, it's a pretty simple tool. You make different type curves, and then you set your rope to it. And depending on what you want to do, you can change the rope count. So if you wanted that one to go to 3 rope count or 4, you'd go in and see that one's actually pretty tight rope compared to the other one. So you've got 4 compared to 2 wrapped around if you want to change the length. And if you want to change the rope thickness, I've got this to snap at about 0.25 thickness, so you get a thinner rope, all the way up to 1.5 inches to 2 inches. So if it went up to 2, I thought I had my step on it, 150, but maybe not, 1.5. Anyway, so that's close to a 1.5 inch thick rope. Everything's set to scale. So like I said, there's your target curve. There's your second target curve, third and fourth, and we'll jump into the cluster. Basically, if I go in, you can take a look. Here is the cluster. It works fairly simple. I have a number that I called feet that runs through, and I do prefer to have icons on. So, but what happens with that is you lose the kind of name of what you're calling things. So basically, what I did was I multiplied by 12 inches. So I always wanted to work a number that would multiply the rope by feet for some reason. Some people don't do that, but I did. And then I also had a snapping thickness in here that I was able to relate and build an interpolated curve that basically was the sine curve that made a very interesting rope. And you can change that a little bit, but otherwise it's pretty much preset. Hang on, Max. I then did a polar array of how many iterations you want to do in this number system, and I've used the flow tool, which basically takes, you have to set up a base curve, which here happens to be just a line. The base curve is preset as a line from 0 to the end in the x direction, and then you can actually set in your target curve will be whatever curve you bring to it, and the geometry, of course, is the geometry that's there that's preset. So everything's kind of preset and then pre-piped. And then this one comes out as this geometry because that curve that was set in there happens to be this one while we're looking at it. I brought it in. So when you get that, you save and close, and you're back out for a second, and that was it. So each one, and then I did cluster those. After I had one, I took it up here to File, and I made Create a User Object. So what's nice is I have this user object that I can just bring in. We'll run it down here, anywhere I want. You can set your rope count to, actually what I'll do is I'll just copy this. You could just set your rope count to maybe 3. You might want your feet, your length to be a little longer. Let's say we wanted to edit the length and bring it up to 120 feet of rope. And what I'll end up running is this rope around, and then the thickness of this rope is actually going to be, edit the thickness. I'm going to pull that up to 2 inches, which is pretty darn big. And for it's going to look, you'll see the differences this as it wraps. It probably will be too thick at 2 inches. Let's just go to the 1 inch thickness. And that's it. And the feet is 150. And then we need a target curve. And what we can do is I could build a system. And what I'm going to do is go to my top view, into my front view. And what I'm going to end up doing in time is I'm just going to build it loosely now. I'm going to build a rope that kind of comes up and then starts to arc around and come down and then go back around a pulley. And it's really ugly. And then it's going to go back down, go around a block and tackle system like that. And I actually close the rope which is like a hairpin. Very ugly. Sorry, it's kind of, yeah, hold on a second, Max. You'll have to clean your hands in a sec. We're going to set one value to there, and then you can see how that rope basically behaves like a very crude block and tackle system. 150 feet is quite large for what I'm making. But you can start to wrap that geometry very tightly around very specific arcs, and you can make a pretty cool shape. So anyhow, that's it. It'll be a cluster and a small file for GitHub.